Yes, I never even knew they had this thing.
All right, excellent. Welcome, everybody. I'm Peter Sherwin. I'm president of Sons of the Revolution in the state of New York and our Fraunces Tavern Museum, where you are this evening. As you may know, we were instituted in 1876, 150 years ago, by grandchildren of patriots who risked their lives in the cause of independence through their military service. And we are here to continue what our founders did, which is to perpetuate the memory of their service and their commitment to our country. Specifically, tonight is a great night. We do Tallmadge Day every year, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Tallmadge in just a moment, but that's what we're celebrating here this evening, and thank you so much for joining with us to do that. And but before we go any further, I'd like us to rise for the invocation by board member Steve Madsen.
We'll get up here. Let's pray. Almighty God, your psalmist writes, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. We ask you to bless us in our commemoration this evening. We are grateful for the life and service of Frederick Samuel Tallmadge, whose generosity allowed the Sons of the Revolution to acquire Fraunces Tavern in 1904. Fill us with the spirit of gratitude as we contemplate your providence in the life of this republic. Lord of history, we ask you to sustain this republic, to bless its president and all its officers, especially its watchmen, the members of the armed services who stand guard throughout the world. We ask all this in your sacred name. Amen.
Thank you. And if you could remain upstanding, Scott Jeffrey, are you in the room? Would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I'd love to. Thanks.
And there's a flag right
Here
behind
is our
you.
flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. So please have a seat. Before we get things rolling a little bit further, I want to recognize some people who are with us here this evening. We have Owen Cloder, our first vice president of the Sons and chair of our executive committee, Mark Kapinski, our treasurer, Scott Jeffrey, whom you just met, our registrar, and Peter Hine, my immediate predecessor, our past president. Also on our board, we've got Steve Madsen, who you met earlier, John Works, who also serves as assistant registrar, Carl Raymond, and Russell Moore. Russell. In addition, of course, we've got Scott Dwyer, our executive director, yay, Noah Dool, our senior development officer, and Melissa Lauer, our manager of education and public policy. We also have, everybody is a wonderful welcome guest here at Fraunces Tavern in our museum, but there are a couple other people that I wanted to point out. We have with us this evening Debbie Kapinski, who is past regent of the Mary Washington Colonial Chapter. There you go. Is Melinda Allison here? She was going to be. I'll recognize her later. Catherine Jackson. Where's Catherine? No. The snow got the better of her. We've got Ann Fairley, who is past.
Nothing.
No, you're many things, but none of them past. Mary Washington chapter, so many other things. Great to see you, Ann. Thank you for coming. And Nicole Chalet, Executive Director, National Association of Colonial Dames. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Also, we've got some sponsors this evening. I just want to thank for their contributions this evening. That's Michael Coney's, Bill Eakins, Peter Hine, Laura Matson, and Tri-Spy Tours. So thank you all very much. A little advertisement. We've got George Washington's birthday coming up next month, and we're excited about it, and we know you are as well. We throw a big birthday party for him in the form of a ball. This is the 149th year we've thrown a ball for his birthday. This year it's at the Metropolitan Club on Friday, February 20. Tickets are still available. We hope very much that you'll join us for that. If you can't make that, here back at Fraunces Tavern Museum, we've got an open house on Saturday, February 21. And then also on Sunday, we've got a church service at Church of the Incarnation, not too far from here. And we commemorate the birth of George Washington, as well as the passing of some of our members of the Sons over the past year. Everyone is welcome to that. Now, a little bit about Frederick Samuel Tallmadge. You heard in the invocation a little bit about him. He was the grandson of Benjamin Tallmadge, who served as George Washington's spy master during the war. He was one of 13 founding members of Sons of the Revolution and incorporators of us in 1883. And he was our second president for a long time, 1884 until his death in 1904. One of the things that he really tried to accomplish during his presidency, including strengthening the Sons into what we're now enjoying today, was to acquire Fraunces Tavern and some of the surrounding buildings. And that was finally made possible in 1904 when the owner agreed to sell to the society. And as his last official act, he signed the contract of purchase. Fortunately, he died later that year, but he was also very generous. And in his will, he left us sufficient funds with which to pay for the building. And we then restored it and opened it up to the public starting on December 4, 1907. Of course, that's the anniversary of George Washington's farewell here in our long room. And that's why we celebrate Tallmadge Day every year, right around his birthday, which was January 24, 1824. So if you brought a glass in, please raise it with me in salute and thanks to Frederick Samuel Tallmadge. Now, Mr. Clutter, I think we have a new member with us. Excellent. And Mr. Jeffrey, would you join us as well up here? And let's get him beribboned.
With Mr. Rod Cyrus Farhadi. Come on. Good to see you. Hi. Welcome to our newest member.
Thank you.
Rod Cyrus Farhadi and his patriot ancestor fought in the Virginia militia, I believe.
Yes,
Right? And you live here in the city?
I do. Midtown.
Yes, and are an actor, I believe.
Yes, I am. Come see Ragtime on Broadway. 8 times a week. Thank you.
Yeah.
Not Monday night, so I'm grateful to be here. With you.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
All right, so now to the main event of this part of our evening. Our guest speaker is Kevin Draper, And he's an historian and co-founder of New York Historical Tours, as many of you know. And he's going to speak on the subject of the American Revolution in the greater New York region during the year 1776, plus or minus. And this is part of our 250th anniversary lecture series, which is in coordination with where we just had the reception earlier, which is our current special exhibit commemorating the semiquincentennial, entitled Path to Liberty, the Emergence of a Nation. And please come back frequently because we're always updating the exhibit. We're going to have it run the entire 250th anniversary period of the American Revolutionary War. Now, Kevin is a sought-after New York City historian, an impassioned native New Yorker, and he brings to life, as you already know or you will see, the incredible and inspiring stories that have made New York the most exciting and influential city in the world. And I say that with no sarcasm whatsoever, because this is where it happens. And for over 15 years, Kevin has provided top-rated first-class tours and New York City experiences for locals and visitors from all over the globe. He has dynamic knowledge, professionalism, and a gift for storytelling. And he's led historical talks and lectures in addition for top universities and Fortune 500 companies. And he's done historical consultancy for media and publications, including CBS, ABC, Bloomberg, etc. And with no further ado, Kevin, please come on up and tell us all about what was going on in New York.
Thank you. Well, thank you for that, and thank you for everybody for being here tonight. And thank you to the Sons of the Revolution of the State of New York for inviting me here to speak tonight. And what I'm going to do is, yes, with the 250 this year, I'm going to be focusing on New York City in particular, and what New York City and its important role before, during, and even right after the revolution. I'm going to take it right up to when George Washington was sworn in as first president, just a few blocks from here, when this was the first capital. So again, I really want to kind of go over why New York was so important during the revolution. And also for all of us, with our family, with our friends, I'm going to point out a few of these places that I'm going to talk about and tell some stories about that you could actually visit. Some places in Brooklyn, some places here in Manhattan, a few other places in the New York area. So that's another part of what I'm doing tonight, is I'm going to point out a lot of places for you that you can visit. Don't expect you to remember it. So after the talk, feel free to ask me. I'll give you a little list of places you can definitely visit. Now, I am taking a moment to take us all the way back, because 2025 and 2026 is the 400th anniversary of New York City. It wasn't New York then, it was New Amsterdam. And just to kind of get your bearings, right over here, that is Fort Amsterdam, is where the Customs House is today. That's only a few blocks from here. That's Bowling Green. Back over here is the Wall of Wall Street, just to kind of give you your bearings and what you're looking at. And when the Dutch settled here almost 400 years ago, unlike the British, the French, the Portuguese, and the Spanish at the time, when they were coming to this side of the world, the Dutch, it really was just for business. It wasn't really military coming in, and there was no real religious overtones to any of this colony. If anything, it was more open to different religions coming in. Even at this colony of New Amsterdam, which that was the capital of the area, which was New Netherlands. And just north of here would be New England, which we still say today, New England. We don't really call this area New Netherlands anymore, which I'll get to in a moment. And the other thing with the Dutch, at this time, with only a few thousand people living here, you already had about 18 languages being spoken. Now we're up to over 800, by the way. Now, the Dutch were here for almost 40 years. The colony itself was growing and becoming more successful as the years went by. And keep in mind, too, that the Dutch invented what we consider to be the modern corporation, and even the idea of stocks and the stock market. And this was not lost on Great Britain, because they realized when they were obviously the colonies were starting to develop around here, that right in the middle of the map, there's this area called New Netherland and a capital called New Amsterdam. So they felt that it was time to take it right at the height of its success. So in 1664, a fleet shows up into New York Harbor, and the plan is to take it by force. Right here, that is Peter Stuyvesant, and Peter Stuyvesant was ready to fight, but the townspeople, especially the business leaders, had no intentions of doing that because this was a business colony. They did not want to fight and die over it. And even the British that were waiting out in the harbor ready to attack, because literally the cannons were looking at each other, they didn't necessarily want to attack and destroy the city either, because then what are you actually taking? Nothing if you destroy the city. So within the course of a couple of weeks, they're going to work out a deal. New York's always about deals. So they're going to work out a deal where that the Dutch could stay, keep doing business as usual, so to speak, but the British would take it over. And it was part of the greatest British Empire, which most of the business leaders felt that that was good to do that anyway. So when it was agreed to do this, no exaggerations, everything went right back to normal. The Wall of Wall Street, I'll show you that one more time. The Wall of Wall Street was, for the most part, built to keep the British out. So once the British took it over, they basically said free wood and the wall disappeared. So now the colony is still New Amsterdam, and the King of England is more or less going to present it to his brother, who was the Duke of York. And the Duke of York said, thank you for this colony of New Amsterdam, but I'm changing the name to New York. So that's where we get our name, New York, from the Duke of York. And the Fort Amsterdam is now going to be Fort George, which will be here right up through the American Revolution, which I'll get to later. So for almost 100 years now, the colonies, all the colonies are growing, but everything is pretty much on this side of the Appalachian Mountains. So what about on the other side? And this is a pretty massive country, which, by the way, I do want to make the point that when all this is happening here, the Native Americans, of course, have been here for thousands of years. So the question is now, between the French, the Spanish, and the British, what lands are going to be taken? How is this going to be divided up over time? And those tensions are going to reach a boiling point where finally it'll come to the French and Indian War in 1754. For the most part, it was a fight over the Ohio River Valley, but it's going to quickly escalate into more of a world conflict. So in Europe, they're going to call it the 7 Years' War, but we're going to call it the French and Indian War. And this is where a 22-year-old George Washington, who's in charge of the Virginia militia, will go to this area, and the first battle of the war that kicks off the entire French and Indian War, which again is known as the 7 Year War, there's a possibility that George Washington might have even fired that first shot. And just so when you're looking here, just everything in blue is what was French territory, everything in red was British territory, yellow was the Spanish territory. What's going to end up happening is eventually the British will win. They'll drastically add to the size of the British territory here up through Canada and all the way down through the South. And George Washington, because of this, he's going to learn leadership lessons really from his time fighting in this war. And it means is that he's going to learn how to actually have a command, what it means to win, what it means to lose and retreat, what it means to build forts, and ultimately even what just frontier warfare is all about. So this is a very important time in George Washington's life. Now, wars, no matter what century it's in, cost money. So whenever somebody's going to some war, it's going to cost an incredible amount of money. Sometimes we seem to forget that, but they cost a lot of money. So the King George III realized, because he was heavily in debt, that we needed to pay for this war, and not only pay for the war, but to protect the colonies for any particular invasions that could possibly happen. Now, at this time, the American colonies thought themselves as British subjects, but they were developing habits of local self-governance, meaning it's been almost 100 years. So generation after generation, people, even though they consider themselves to be British, they were also thinking themselves more as a New Yorker, a Bostonian, a Virginian. So this idea of taxes is not going to go over too well in the colonies. And the first major thing that's going to happen in 1765 is the Stamp Act. Now, this is Britain's first direct tax on the American colonies. It's basically, you're putting this stamp on all paper documents, like legal papers, wills, newspapers, playing cards. So just about everything. So it's going to affect everybody. So they made everybody angry. Matter of fact, this is a protest that was taking place in New York, because when the ships showed up with these actual stamps, there was going to be big protests against this, real fiery protests. And you're going to see the creation of the Sons of Liberty at this time. You might know a few of the members: Sam Adams, John Hancock, Paul Revere, just to name a few. This group will sort of lead the charge in protesting and pushing back against this. Now, because of this, it's also going to lead to organized protests of boycotting British goods. And this is where, from this point forward, it can't be underestimated how important the women were during this entire time, before the revolution and during revolution, because they're the ones that are making the decisions of what's going to be bought for the household. So they're the ones that are going to hold the line and say, okay, I'm not going to buy British goods, or we're going to make our own clothing at home. Ultimately, when the war starts, not only are they taking care of the home and the kids, but they're going to be doing the farming. They're going to be taking things to market. I can't relay enough how hard these women had to work during the American Revolution. So they're going to be a big part of the success of this. Yes, it's well deserved. Now, by 1766, it will be repealed, but they do pass the Deregulatory Act, which asserts Parliament's absolute authority to pass new laws. So it's like they rescinded it, but at the same time, they're giving themselves the power to kind of do it again. And then by 1767, the British Parliament passes the Townshend Act, which will put duties on glass, lead, paint, paper, and the big one, tea, which is something that everyone drank. Doesn't matter what your economic situation, everybody drank tea, from the poorest to the wealthiest people in the colonies. Now, that is not going to go over too well with the tea. Now, in the meantime, you're going to have the Boston Massacre that takes place in 1770. Wasn't really a massacre. That's another story for another day, but it is going to really inflame the colonists. And then by 1773, we will have the Boston Tea Party. This is where it's really going to start to make national news here, but more importantly, back in England. And one of the things that they were protesting is not only the fact of the tax on the tea, but one thing that people overlook is that it was a monopoly. It was the British East India Company, the only ones that can sell tea and set the price. So this was a pushback, even though the price, believe it or not, was lower. This was a pushback on the idea of a monopoly and how bad a monopoly really could be. Now, when you see it or you read about it, about the Boston Tea Party, it just seems like they're throwing a couple of crates of tea into the water. Well, in today's dollars, the lowest number that you'll find when you do research is about $1 million. So that is a lot of tea, and that is a huge value. So that's why this was such a big deal. And because of that, they're going to pass the Intolerable Acts, which is going to close the Boston port, restricting self-governance and forcing colonists now in Boston to quarter troops. Now, this is not a time of war. So just imagine if the military shows up, say in New York, and they say, well, we're going to live in your apartment with you. I mean, this really, really, really upset people in Boston. And again, this is 1774. At that time, what's going to happen is by 1775, with Boston being sort of under this, I don't know what the good word for it is, but just under this occupation, basically, they find out that there's weapons in Concord. So they're going to send troops from Boston to go through Lexington over to Concord to get those weapons. And this is where one of several people will make the famous ride, Paul Revere, to ride ahead to warn them what's coming. And at the time, they did have a militia in Lexington and Concord, But 20% of that, when you signed up, 20% of the people that signed up to be in the militia, you agreed that you'd be ready in a minute. In other words, if they gave you the word, you had to go. So they became known as Minutemen. So the Minutemen got together immediately, and when they got to Lexington, we don't know which side, but somebody fired a shot. And that's where we get that famous saying, shot heard around the world. Because this was a little bit more of a massacre, because a lot of Americans would die here. They would go straight to Concord. There'd be another battle there. And then we would thankfully push the British all the way back to Boston. But now it's definitely serious, because now blood has been spilt. So now we are definitely, there's no turning back at this point. This is 1775, right here in New York City at the same time, in 1775 in the harbor, because we have the fort that's here, Fort George. A young patriot named Alexander Hamilton is going to take his company to go steal some cannons and some ammunition out of the fort. And the HMS Asia will start to shell that fort, and a cannonball hits Fraunces Tavern. So it comes through the roof. I don't know if it was maybe here. I think it's probably back over that way that it came through. But so a cannonball did come through the roof of Fraunces Tavern. Now, that's 1775. 1776, March of 1776, the British are driven out of Boston. Washington, the Continental Army, will get up to a place known as Deutscher Heights in Boston. They'll have their cannons fixed on the city and, more importantly, the harbor. So they will leave Boston, the British. So it's considered a victory for us. But Washington knows that this is probably not going to go over too well, and that they're going to come back with even more ships and more troops. They'll probably come to New York, because the thought is we need to split the colonies. And getting New York City is the way to do that. So in June 29th, 1776, 400 ships enter New York City harbor. They land in Staten Island. And to put this into perspective also, over 400 ships, that's the largest fleet that Britain had ever sent out in their history up until that point. And they don't do anything close to that again until D-Day in World War II. So that's how big this is how serious they were of crushing this rebellion as quick as they could. So they do land on Staten Island first to unload and basically to plan what's going to be next. Washington is not sure what to do. And in the meantime, when they're trying to figure out what's going to happen, on July 2nd, the Second Continental Congress officially voted to declare independence from Great Britain, July 2nd. Now, July 2nd, they voted to declare independence, and it was official. So yes, we can start celebrating independence on July 2nd, because even John Adams said this will be the day that we're going to celebrate with fireworks and parties. It was on July 4th that the document was officially approved, but more or less it was printed on July 4th, and that's what we have on July 4th. But I just want to make that point. So on July 2nd, definitely we can start celebrating. And for everybody here, they have an original rough draft of the Declaration of Independence at the main branch of the New York Public Library on 42nd and 5th. They only bring it out a couple of days a year, usually July 2nd, 3rd, and up to, I think they're open on the 4th. So that's the only time that you can see it. So I would highly recommend, because it is the rough draft. So it's pretty amazing to see the things that are crossed out, little notes made on the side of the Declaration of Independence. And I know, I'm sure with the 250 this year, I'm sure we'll have a few other things in there, connected to it. They do have a copy of the Bill of Rights there. They have George Washington's farewell speech. So definitely make it a point if you can visit the New York Public Library this year. But back to New York and back to the Revolution, because now on July 9th, copies are made of the Declaration of Independence. Washington has his copy read up at the Commons, which is where City Hall Park is today. And later that night, you're going to have a group of people coming down to Bowling Green Park, which, by the way, is just a few blocks from here. It is the oldest public park in New York City. It was built in 1733. And that statue of King George was put up in 1770. And in 1773, because tensions were starting to rise, they did put a fence around there, which they'll immediately take down the fence and they're going to pull down this statue and they're going to melt the statue down to make thousands of musket balls to use in the revolution. So they're literally going to be shooting British soldiers with bullets made out of King George. Well, anybody here from Britain, I'm sorry. That's part of the story. Now, the pieces were found many decades later, including the horse's tail, which was found in Wilton, Connecticut, and that is in the New York Historical. So if you have a chance to go up to New York Historical, which is right next to the Museum of Natural History, you can see the tail of the horse. And I have a feeling they're going to be doing some stuff this year too for the 250. So they're going to tear that down. Now, what is this leading up to? Well, it's going to lead up to the Battle of Brooklyn, depending on which book you read, or it could say the Battle of Long Island, same place. Believe it or not, a lot of people don't know that, but it is the same place, Long Island, Brooklyn. And what's going to happen here is Washington did not know where the British would attack. What is going to be on Manhattan? Where they're going to go up the East River? They're going to go up the Hudson River? Are they going to attack? Come right into Brooklyn? Well, it turns out it was Brooklyn. So they are going to have these troops come across Staten Island and land here in this part of Brooklyn. And at the meantime, a little bit further up in what we would call Brooklyn Heights today, that's where a lot of the big fortifications have been set up. And there is an area here known as the Guananis Ridge. And that ridge goes along that whole section of Brooklyn. And there's only 4 ways to get across that ridge to heading towards Brooklyn Heights. So Washington's feeling is that we need to defend that. But this was one of the biggest mistakes that he'll make, I think, as a general, is he's only going to cover 3 of those, which I'll show you in a moment. So he's only going to cover a few of them here. And what's going to end up happening is that when the battle really kicks in, and so by the way, in blue, that's the Americans. So as the British are coming in, Washington feels that that is where the main part of the attack is taking place. And at first, the battle looks like it's going in the favor of the Continental Army, but Washington didn't realize that that was not the main attack. That really what they were doing is that they were going to come over here on the pass up here known as the Jamaica Pass, which he did not have enough troops waiting there at all. So they were able to send thousands of British soldiers and basically come at the Americans from 2 different sides. So instead of fighting straight on, they're coming at you from 2 sides. That was the biggest mistake that he had made during the Battle of Brooklyn, and it's going to turn into a real disaster. So one of the generals, General Alexander, is going to realize that they're coming from both sides, that they're definitely, this is going to be a slaughter. So he orders everybody to retreat back to Brooklyn Heights. So first, a lot of these people have to get through these marshes and stuff. Many men are drowning because they can't swim, or that they're too much their stuff they're carrying. Again, they're being attacked from both sides. And Alexander decides to take 400 soldiers and just go right and keep attacking the British, attacking. Out of that 400, about 12 will make it to the end. So people were killed or taken captive. But that gave time for the rest of the soldiers, a few thousand people, to get to Brooklyn Heights. So really that saved the army to fight another day. It's known as the Old Stone House, where that big battle took place. Again, this is one of these places that you can go visit. There was a Hessian chaplain that saw the battlefield, and he was horrified of what he'd seen. And I want to just say this, and I'll only say it once, is that when you think of the American Revolution, I think a lot of times we see reenactments or if it's a documentary, they shoot somebody, they fall down, but it was really bloody. And it was really, when you're shooting not only just bullets, but cannonballs. And again, I'm going to just say this once, people were getting their heads blown off. And when you got really close, you can only shoot 1 bullet at a time. So most of it was hand-to-hand combat where you're fighting with your bayonet. So people were being hacked to death. So I just wanted to drive that point home because the revolution was a very tough, bloody war, face to face. And they even noticed it on this battlefield. And by the way, this Battle of Brooklyn is the biggest battle of the entire revolution that takes place here. But they did make it back past the old stone house to Brooklyn Heights, and Washington is going to order a retreat. One of the most important parts of a battle is to know how to retreat if need be. So he's going to get every single available boat to try to get the troops across. I think Washington was in shock for the fact that the British didn't finish them off, because they did have them trapped right there at the East River. But the thought is that the British fleet was going to come up the East River and then block them in. So the fact that they didn't finish them off, we got pretty lucky. So we came very close to me giving this talk tonight with a British accent. So what ends up happening is Washington will get these boats in the middle of the night, bringing everybody across. And you can imagine all the horses, all the cannons, all the artillery, trying to get across the East River without the British that are just sitting out there in those boats not seeing this. The weather was kind of rainy and stuff too, so that definitely helped. But they had to get everybody across. Now, by the way, this is roughly where the Brooklyn Bridge is today. So next time you're down by the seaport, or if you're in Dumbo and you're standing and looking at the Brooklyn Bridge, this is where one of the most important events in American history took place, because this is what's going to save the army. So that following morning, not everybody's across. Like something out of a movie, like if you actually had it in a movie, it'd be unbelievable. A fog rolled in. So that gave them sort of extra time to get across. And Washington was in one of the last boats that came across. Now, after that, it's obvious after that battle that we're probably going to lose. So they had a conference on September 11th, 1776, September 11th, 1776, at this place that's now known as the Conference House. It was owned by British loyalist Colonel Christopher Billop. He hosted the informal diplomatic conference, and at this conference was Ben Franklin, Edward Rutledge, and John Adams for the Americans. And on the British side, you had Lord Richard Howe, Admiral of the Fleet. And he had the full power, and he did offer them that pretty much if they give up this idea of this revolution, that they would more or less be pardoned. Now, these are my words, but basically you're saying we're going to take that declaration and rip it up and make pretend it never happened. That's basically, that's what they were offering them. You can imagine, after that Battle of Brooklyn, after those 400 ships, you would think they might even consider that, but no, they did not. They said, sorry, but we're not going to do this. This is not negotiable. We're still going to fight. We're still going to have our fight for independence. So that means there's no going back, and we're going to have to fight this out. And again, this is the summer of 1776 that all this is happening. Next will come the landing at Kips Bay. What happened here was, now, remember, Washington's back in Manhattan, basically around where we are now. And he's trying to fortify the city because he doesn't know where the British are going to invade Manhattan. Are they going to come in from the Hudson River? Are they somewhere along the East River? Where are they going to come? Anywhere along here, which, by the way, when you said New York City, you just meant this little tiny tip down here. This was nothing but open country, more or less, up in here. Well, it turns out they are going to invade right here, Kips Bay. And just to give you your sense of where that is, that's around 34th Street. So that's where some 4,000 British troops will land. And the Americans that were there were completely outnumbered and quickly started to run and go back the other direction. So the battle's kind of played out along here. Washington shows up out of nowhere, trying to convince people to go back into battle. Somebody grabbed his horse and basically pulled him away because he came very close to either being killed or being captured. So once again, the war could have ended right then and there. This whole thing is taking place along again where 34th Street is, which just blows my mind when you think about it. That's if you think about where Macy's is and the Empire State Building, you think of Madison Square Garden, that's where this is playing out. So what's going to happen is Washington will make the decision to retreat with Putnam, and they're going to head north to the higher ground in Hamilton Heights. And the British are going to come down to actually take the city because that was their goal. Brooklyn was only a town, but this was their goal, to get the city, and this is what's going to happen. September 15th, 1776. Within that week, a fire breaks out in the city of New York downtown. Now, this was a devastating fire. The fire is going to destroy 20% of the city. So just think of our city now. Now we're 100 times bigger now, but still, I said destroyed 20% of the city. If you do research, the lowest number you'll see is around 400 something, and I've seen it up to 1,000. So let's just go with the low number. 400 buildings destroyed. I mean, can you imagine that today, hearing that 400 buildings destroyed? So this was devastating for the city. The British immediately blamed Washington, and we felt maybe it was them. Well, most likely, we don't know what really happened, but most likely it was an accident. The idea of Washington setting fire to the city, I don't think so. And of course, why would the British do that? Because they just took over the city. But it is going to anger the British to no end. Which, by the way, they wouldn't even start rebuilding the city, including Trinity Church, which a few blocks from here, completely burned to the ground. They're not even going to start to rebuild that until after the war. So in the meantime, Washington is up here at the Morris Jamel, which is now known as the Morris Jamel Mansion, built by Robert Morris. He was a loyalist, built the home in 1770. He left the city in 1775. Washington will take over the home, and he's going to use this as a headquarters for about 5 weeks. So Washington will be here for almost 5 weeks. Again, this is a place that you can visit today. And what Washington is going to do is plan sort of a counterattack, which is going to be known as the Battle of Hamilton Heights, which I'll tell you about in a moment. And the Battle of Harlem Heights is where the British didn't expect us to sort of have an attack to come at them, which we did. So we kind of took them by surprise. And we ended up pushing the British pretty much back to where Central Park is today. And eventually Washington came right back up because he knew we were lucky that we're not really going to continue to push the British back. And then eventually he'll get out of the city. So we considered that a victory. The British didn't. They didn't think they thought it was just a little skirmish. But at least for us, it looked like a victory, especially after what happened in Brooklyn. This was a very important thing to happen. Now, again, for places to visit, this is Columbia University. That's the mathematics building. This is around 116 to 117 Street, so 117 and Broadway. This is a plaque to remember that Battle of Harlem Heights and how important that was. And speaking of, when I just pointed out Columbia, it was started off as King's College, just a few blocks from here. That's where the college was, roughly where the Woolworth building is today, sort of that area by just west of City Hall. That's where King's College was. John Jay was a graduate. Hamilton did not graduate, but he did go there. And the two of them, after the war, because the college was closed during the war, Hamilton and John Jay would be two of the most important people to get the school reopened. Hamilton helped it get on a good financial footing, and his son, even grandsons, would be involved with the college. Way after the war, it moves uptown. This dirt road is Madison Avenue, and this is 50th Street. Because the college at the time, it's not a university, the college was in Midtown, roughly, again, Madison and 50th. Again, that's Madison and 50th, and over by roughly where Rockefeller Center is today. They do make the jump to Morningside Heights and become a university. They did not forget their revolutionary past. So there is a great statue of Hamilton right in front of Hamilton Hall. So I highly recommend if you want to go see that. And there is also John Jay Hall there also. And that's where the plaque is, again, right on Broadway around 117th Street. After the war, I just want to make a point of some of the other important, interesting things that took place here. When Washington was president of the United States, he will come here and have a dinner because it was turned into an inn. So it was an inn bar. He would have a dinner here with his cabinet. So Thomas Jefferson was here having dinner, John Adams, Alexander Hamilton, and Henry Knox, plus their wives, Abigail Adams, Eliza Hamilton, Martha Washington, and Lucy Knox. There we go. Thanks. Perfect. Thank you. So they had a dinner, and also in this home is where Aaron Burr, many years later, would marry Mrs. Trammell, who was one of the wealthiest women in New York. They found out that he was taking some of her money, and she looked to get a divorce, which women were not allowed to do that. But when they heard he was taking her money, they granted the divorce. She got the divorce approved the day he died. It's a little dig at Burr there, but back to the revolution and back to Samuel Francis, which thank you, I just found out tonight, thanks to the museum here, they had proven this is not his portrait. So this is definitely not Samuel Adams, but some other guy from this period. But so let's pretend that's him. And again, thanks to the Sons of the Revolution of the State of New York, this is the opening day. So what happens to Samuel Francis during the war? Well, during the war, he made it over and escaped to Jersey, but he was caught, brought back, forced to work as a family cook for General Robertson. But during this time, he was sneaking food and clothing to the prisoners, and even was helping with some of the intelligence. So you could say he was a little bit of a spy too. So a lot of connections with Francis. And again, we were talking about this before. That's why we're here. Whoops. That's okay. Now, thank you. At that time, a man named Nathan Hale was caught right around the time of that great fire in the city. And again, the British were very angry about this fire. Nathan Hale was a teacher, and he went to Yale University. His classmate was Benjamin Tallmadge, and he got a letter from his classmate from Yale, his friend Benjamin Tallmadge, which convinced him to accept a commission. So he did. He volunteered to join, and also he volunteered essentially to go behind enemy lines in Long Island to be a spy. He was caught, brought back to the city. The trial was very quick. There wasn't much of a trial. And roughly where 66th and 3rd Avenue is today, there is no grid system, but I'm just giving you the location. And roughly around 66th and 3rd is where they did hang him. And this is where he supposedly recited the words, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." Probably one of the most famous sayings for the revolution. And to honor him on the day that he died, I highly recommend, if you have a chance, on September 22nd. Thanks again to the Sons of the Revolution of the State of New York. They do have a ceremony here. This is the statue to Nathan Hale. The pedestal was done by Stanford White. So if you think of McKim, Mead, and White, one of the most important architectural firms of the Gilded Age, they did the Columbia University campus, the old Penn Station, the Harvard Club, the University Club, the list is endless. One of the most important architectural firms, Stanford White. The sculptor was Frederick McMonnies, a very important sculptor at that time. He had an apprenticeship under Augustus St. Gaudens, one of America's most important sculptors, who him and Rodin, if you think of the Thinker statue, were contemporaries. So he's the one that did this statue. The two of them will work together again, by the way, and worked on the Washington Monument. So the same people that worked on the statue of Nathan Hale did the Washington Monument. If you go to Washington Square Park, there's one statue of Washington as a general and another one as president. It was just recently restored, so I highly recommend checking that out. Back to the war. So what's happening? They just hung Nathan Hale. The war is continuing to go on. What are they doing with all these prisoners? Where are all these prisoners going from the Battle of Brooklyn and Battle of Harlem Heights and other battles? Well, they're going to these prison ships, which were docked off of Wallet Bay, which is where the Brooklyn Navy Yard is today. It was horrific conditions, disease, starvation, cold. Most of these people didn't have blankets. But here's why I want us to really think about this. Over 11,000 of our soldiers died on these ships. That is more than every single soldier killed on the battlefield during the entire revolution. So let that sink in. More people died on those ships as prisoners than everyone that fought in battle. Thankfully, we do have an great monument to these people who died. Now, this is the prison ship martyrs memorial dedicated in 1908. At the time, this was President-elect William Howard Taft. He's the one that was here and gave the address. It's also Stanford White who did the actual monument itself. The park is Fort Greene Park, 30-acre park, green from the Revolutionary War. And the park was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux, the same designers of Central Park. So again, this is Fort Greene Park. And they've taken, this is from opening day when they had the big service there. And oh, by the way, that is the crypt, because it's not just a memorial. They got as many of the bodies, the bones that were being found along the Brooklyn waterfront over the years, and they put them in here. So they're all interned there. So, like I said, it's extra powerful when you go to visit this place. So I highly recommend that, just to see this memorial. It's hard even with photos to show you how beautiful this place is, but it's definitely worth seeing. Jumping ahead now on the war, because during the war, New York's role pretty much the entire time mostly is going to be the spying network that's here. And that's going to be a very important part of the war, the information we're going to get during this period. Finally, we get to the Battle of Yorktown, 1781. So the war is it's over, the fighting more or less. It's not going to be completely over to 1783, but this is a very big moment at the end of the war. And when Washington comes back to New York City, evacuation day, November 25th, 1783. This is a very important moment, and I could just imagine what Washington was thinking. If you think about what we talked about earlier in the talk, when he was chased out of New York and it looked like there was no hope, that there was no chance that we were going to win this war, to be coming back here was a pretty incredible moment. This is a monument that's in Union Square Park. You see Washington on his horse with his hand out. This is where there's a lot of the troops sort of gathered, because this wasn't really part of the city. This was kind of further up, kind of almost in the middle of nowhere, which is hard to believe, Union Square. So this is like the spot where we more or less said, let's go, we're going back in to take the city. So it was a very important moment. So if you get a chance to see that statue. And that we also have right here, just a few blocks away, Evacuation Day Plaza. They do, again, keep an eye on that date, because they do have, they do ceremonies around for this. And what was happening on Evacuation Day, well, right here in the club, I mean in the museum, which, by the way, this painting is from Washington's farewell address on December 4th. But I'm just going back a few weeks before this to November 25th, 1783, right over here in the long room, where there'll be a dinner put together by Governor George Clinton, which his nephew is DeWitt Clinton. If we know that name, he's the one that helped get the grid system built in New York, built the Erie Canal. They're related. And here at that night, they had 13 toasts for Evacuation Day. So I'm going to tell you the 13 toasts. Toast number 1, to the United States of America. Number 2, His Most Christian Majesty. Number 3, to the United Netherlands. Number 4, to the King of Sweden. Number 5, to the American Army. Number 6, the fleet and armies of France, which have served in America. Number 7, the memory of those heroes who have fallen for our freedom. That's a great one too. Number 8, may our country be grateful to her military children. Number 9, may justice support what courage has gained. Number 10, the vindicators of the right of mankind in every quarter of the globe. Number 11, may America be an asylum to the persecuted of the earth. I'm going to say that one again. May America be an asylum to the persecuted of the earth. 12, may a close union of the states guard the temple they have erected to liberty. And number 13, May the remembrance of this day be a lesson to the princes. Princes, what is that? Dictators, kings, people that on that ilk. So they were trying to make that point at the end to say that we don't bow to princes and kings and so forth. So those were the toasts that happened here. So tonight after this talk, please raise your glass and try to recycle 13 of them if you can. But again, this is from the night where he bid farewell to his troops, which we do have thanks to Tallmadge, Benjamin Tallmadge, ahead of the spiring, some diary accounts of what was said this night. That will ultimately lead us to 1789, where George Washington is sworn in as first president. In the background, you can see they're rebuilding Trinity Church. Again, I could just try to imagine what Washington was thinking when the revolution started. We thought we were going to lose, and then what he went through and what everybody went through for all those years, and to be standing here just a few blocks from Fraunces Tavern being sworn in as first president of the United States. I think it was a pretty incredible moment. And New York City was the capital for that year. Matter of fact, the building that it's in, Federal Hall, will have quite a few important things happen in the original building that was here. Parts of the Bill of Rights was written here in the original building. The first trial for freedom of the press was in this building. And of course, again, it was the first capital. So Washington kind of had to figure things out here. So it was a really important place. You can visit it in just a few blocks here, and I highly recommended it. And it is a national park, by the way, for those that are checking up on a national parks, it is a national park. So it was Hamilton's home and a few other places. And back to our 250, what we're going to really be looking at July 2nd and July 4th is what all this was all about, which I want to end before I take questions, and just to remind everybody that no matter where you find yourself, right, left, anywhere in between, the whole thing about everything I was talking about tonight is that we came together and we created the United States of America, and we did it together. And if we can remember that and have our differences, but talk them out, but remember that we're all in this together, we can hopefully guarantee another 250 years. So please try to remember that going forward. And on that note, I'd like to say thank you, and I hope you enjoyed it. I was watching the times and I got to dinner, but I want to be able to take a few questions. So
Yes, absolutely. We'll take just a couple of questions from the room. I'll pass this mic around. So anybody have a question for us?
Yeah, you said the second toast that was made tonight of farewell dinner was to.
I want to make sure I get that right. The second toast is His Most Christian Majesty.
Oh, His Most Christian. Who are we talking about?
King George?
No.
No, definitely not.
Louis.
Louis the 14th?
Yeah.
Louis the 16th. So Louis the 16th.
Oh, naturally. Okay,
His Most Christian Majesty, yes.
I forgot that.
That's okay. Had to see which Louis, there's a whole bunch of Louis.
I have a question. The tea rebellion. Was tea the only thing they drink? Did they have coffee? Were they drinking coffee too? Was that another option? Or
They did have coffee houses, but it wasn't, most people still loved tea. That was just part of our culture. After the revolution, it wasn't as much anymore. I mean, coffee would continue to grow and take off, coffee houses, but no, they all around here, even where we are now, there were coffee houses everywhere.
But tea was the main.
Tea was the main thing. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, at that time, definitely was by far. Anybody else? Feel free to ask me anything about the revolution or anything about New York from this period.
So, during the revolution, how far had New York City developed above Wall Street? You talked about.
So when the British took over in 1664, like I said, pretty much that wall comes down. They also used to have a couple of canals. You know where Broad Street is? That used to be a big canal that the Dutch had. But when the British came in, they're like, we don't do canals. So they filled them all in. And when that wall came down, it immediately started to go north up to about where Greenwich Village is today. So during the revolution, that's about as far as the city went where people were living. Now, there were a couple of estates that would be sort of scattered out further up north. But yeah, and then a few more estates will be built after that, like the Gracie estate or Hamilton's home, right? Hamilton eventually builds a home that'll be on 30 something acres. So, but if you're talking about the city, it would basically from the Greenwich Village, which that was more like the suburbs. But the city itself went up to about where City Hall is, because that's where we had King's College was right there. No City Hall yet though, but so, yeah, about as far as Greenwich Village. Okay. Time for one more, yeah.
Yeah, we'll take one more question in the room.
My question is, so when the Americans here, did they have to do a lot of convincing for everybody to unanimously agree to go against the British? I just feel maybe my context of where we are right now is like we can't agree on anything, sort of like you were saying, that I'm just sort of curious, did they have to do a lot of convincing for the British loyalists, or was it sort of unanimous?
Well, definitely not unanimous. I'd say about 1/3 before the revolution, right? So they were 1/3 was for it. 1/3 was not, so they were loyalists, right? And then 1/3 was basically like, we'll just see what happens. Trying to like stay neutral. So really, it was not like, definitely not like everyone was in it. No, not at all. It was like 1/3, especially in New York. As time went by, that would change. Like I said, certain big events, like what happened to Boston Massacre and things like that, little by little, things were changing, no doubt, but not here in New York and not even throughout most of the war. That's why that evacuation day was such a big thing, because it was kind of like anybody that was still a loyalist, you really had to get out. They took people's property. You had to go if you were a loyalist. So yeah, so it was, as you didn't know, Benjamin Franklin, I did talk to his son because his son was a loyalist. Can you imagine? Ben Franklin and his son is a loyalist. Can you imagine those dinner conversations? So that's what I mean. So a lot of families were at each, just kind of like with the Civil War years later, it'd be sort of the same thing, but even more so. Because in a place like New York, you never know your cousin, this, that. And again, a lot of people just going, oh, 1/3 saying, I'll just stay neutral.
Yeah. Thank you.
So Kevin, that was great. Thank you very much. We have a little certificate of appreciation for you right here. Sons of the Revolution in the State of New York hereby recognizes and thanks Kevin Draper for his lecture at our annual Tallmadge Day meeting on the subject of the American Revolution in the Greater New York region in 1776. Thank you very much.
Just want to say that I really do appreciate that, because I've been coming here pretty much my entire life. Usually sitting over there and going to all the exhibits. So yeah, this means a lot to me to speak here too. So I appreciate it.
Madison, would you do a benediction for us? I don't know
After
if you
the talk or after the,
right now, if the
yes, Mr. President.
feeling takes you, and then we're going to adjourn today.
Okay. Thank you. Let us pray. Good and gracious God, fill our hearts and the hearts of all Americans with gratitude for your many gifts, especially the beauty and abundance of your creation and for this great republic. We ask you to bless America, especially in her defense of liberty and in her great tasks for the sake of civilization. May your holy name be blessed forever and ever. Amen.
Excellent. Well, we are now adjourned. I hope you enjoyed the speaker this evening. I don't know how you couldn't. Come back early and often for the rest of our lecture series this year and continuing into next year and on and on. For those of you who signed up to join us for dinner, we're going to go on down to the ground floor to the Bissell Room. We look forward to seeing you there. If you didn't sign up for dinner, I'm gonna go out on a limb, and I think because of the weather, we may have 1 or 2 seats that are available. If so, please see Melissa or please see Scott, and we may be able to sort you out. And if not, look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks.
Well done. Thank you so much. Great. Yeah, that was great. So. I'll let you.
Is it Madsen?
Madsen, yes.
Madsen, okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you were Madsen.
No.
But Madsen.
No, I'm not with a D. I mean.
Yeah, I'm from the